First, I'd like to, it's a pleasure to be here talking with the LISA program. I've been at the LISA network since the beginning, so it's several years in this group. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation, and congratulations for the organizing committee. So talk today about some applications in climate change. It's a joint work with some researchers with expertise in meteorology and climate, some from Norway and some from the United States, and other researchers here from Brazil, from other states. Let me see. So it's changing. So we have this frontier of the climate change. You have lots of data, but the next frontier is trying to get information from those data. How can we extract more meaningful information that can help the policymakers to handle the climate change? And in this network, you can see many instances that you can have statistics and artificial intelligence that will help in this task of producing more information. So we as statisticians, as data scientists, we have lots to contribute in this area. And there are many applications of climate change. Professor David Banks, in the refugee camps, he mentioned about the climate change. This has influence in many aspects of our life. And just to introduce, I see some applications, mention some of applications of artificial intelligence. So we have seen some research work doing in this area. And the main application that I could found is related to support decision-making. We also have Professor Ahmed El-Ragal in the first day. He talked about the role of artificial intelligence in supporting decision-making. And I've seen many works trying to fill observation gaps. And this is a joint work with artificial intelligence, some algorithms, and numerical climate models. With those together, they can fill these gaps. And I'll talk first about my motivation to start working in this area. So I started working with this climate change around 2014, about the same time that I joined the LISA network. And the idea is to understand the extreme events. They have a special role in our society. In 2014, this is a picture of the region that I live in Brazil, in Natal. It's a city that's not common to have too much rain, and it's called the Sun City, because we say that we have 360 days of sun, but we had some in 2014, extreme event, lots of rain, and it was many of landslides. And this is a very touristic region. It's in the coast near the beach, one of the beaches that attracts lots of tourists, and have this huge landslide. So there is evidence that extreme events will become more frequent all over the Earth. Professor Banks talked about the increase in temperature, but you have also more rain, tornadoes, landslides. Lots of extreme events is expected to become more frequent and all over the world. And our one question, how can we get understanding and models if they are good enough to predict these extreme events? There have been lots of advances in this area, but still the models, they have large errors. So that's an opportunity for us as statisticians and data scientists. So my motivation to work in this area is to help to evaluate the climate and weather simulators that I used to do some of the predictions of these extreme events. And these climate weather simulators, they use just a very brief overview of how they work. They try to model different aspects of the Earth. They try to represent how the rain is formed, how it interacts with the air, with the soil. So here's one example of a forecasting model that's called the Weather Research and Forecasting Model. And for us, it's a set of differential equations that are running inside of each of these boxes. And they have global models and regional models. Global models for a larger scale, and they are used to also downscale to regional models with a lower scale. And we need to understand how all these processes work. And they've been increasing the use of such numerical models. This is an example from the WRF, the Weather Research and Forecast model, that they've been used all over the world. And they are also replaced now, this for more modern and simulation models. This had the exponential increase since 2001 until 2007 and 8, but it's been increasing and new models have been developed. And I'll talk about how can you use experimentation to understand these weather and forecasting models. What happens is there are many users, but some of those users, they use for day-to-day prediction. So they don't have time to do research, to understand how these models work. And these models, they have different configurations, and these configurations depends on the location. And since the users don't have time to do research and see what's the best model for their region, they usually use some configuration that was analyzed for one specific region, but may not be good for another region. Here we have an example of a study that was done to compare 24 configurations. These models, so those boxes that I showed before, they are comprised with different models. Even to, for example, if we want to explain how the clouds are formed and how they produce rain, there are different models just for this process. And if you combine all these possibilities, we have millions of possible configurations to set those models. So if a user is running a model to do some prediction, it has to specify all these configurations. So that's why they don't have understanding of how these configurations operate. They use the one that was already studied. In this example, in this figure, we have like 24 configurations used to study maximum temperature in the months of June, July, and August in almost of the America. And we are seeing in this color, the white would be that the model predicted the observer data. So this is done with past data to see if the model was going to perform well with the predict well the past data. So if you have some orange and red, means that the prediction is overestimated. So the temperature is higher than the actual was, and the bluish it's an underestimation. So the model predicts lower temperatures. So we see that depending on the configuration, we see different patterns. A good pattern would be one that's all white. So there are some of them that are most of white. And to do such a study, one model simulation may take months to be done. So that's why the users don't have the time to spend doing those simulations. So there are research centers that do some, but even the research centers, they need time, and also it involves a lot of computing time and storage for managing all those data. So here just a snapshot of just one aspect of the temperature. So to have this challenge, so that's how that's an opportunity for us. So there have been some papers showing the importance of the statisticians in the climate research. And it was noted that there was not many statisticians working in this area. And also the methods. I will talk more about design of experiments. There was little application of design of experiments in this area. So what has been done in this comparison is the research center checks how the resource that they have, the time and computer storage, and they run some simulations and they focus on comparing, usually through maps, which models, which configuration is the best. So they focus on what's the best configuration, but they understand why this configuration is the best is not needs a great effort from this procedure. So that's why you can use the DOE framework to understand better why there is a better performance of the possible configuration. So we propose this framework that we call the CSI idea. This is the climate statistics idea. And we constitute of 8 steps. So it involves the objective of the experiment, how to get the variables of interest, how to get appropriate metrics, how to get the source of uncertainty that are of interest to be studied, the available resource. And with all these, we focus on how to design the experiment, execute the simulations, and do the analysis. Our main contributions are in those 6, steps 6 and 8, how to design the experiment and how to analyze. And all the steps we need to do in collaboration with the experts in the area of climate and meteorology. So this is for the methodology statistical part. Steps 6 and 8 are the backbones. We use this approach, this CSI framework, in a case study to get the temperature in the northeast of Brazil. We had a lot epidemic of dengue fever, and it's related to the mosquitoes, and there are some specific temperature that for the life cycle of the mosquito, so it's important to understand the temperature. So we use the same database that I showed before of the 24. So in this case, we applied the framework, but when the data had already been collected when we joined the project. So our focus in this project was the analysis. So we used this database that was from 1990 until 2000 and from all the Americas, and we concentrated in this part that is the northeast part of Brazil. So our objective was to investigate the role of parameterization schemes on the forecast of temperature in the northeast of Brazil. We studied the maximum and the minimum temperature, and we studied some metrics. The difference skill score was the one that I showed in the previous picture. The difference between the observed value and the predicted by the model. When we studied some extreme events, and we were interested in 4 sources of uncertainty: the models for radiation, for the cumulus, the microphysics, and the planetary boundary layer. And identifying the resource, there were resources to do the 24 combinations. That was the what we call a full factorial. All possible combinations were run. They execute all the experiment, the simulations, and we used an approach to identify what would be the best configuration and why this is the best. So I use the length plots when you can see all the contributions of all the sources of uncertainty, their main effects, and also the interactions of the sources of uncertainty. And then we identified this is one. And since we had several metrics, we used principal component analysis to get an overview of all the metrics. And for the first principal component, we identified that the main contribution in this case was the radiation effect. And you can see the performance. The interpretation of the principal component indicated that the higher the value of the principal components, the better the performance of the configuration. So we understood that this model, this radiation scheme, RMTG, what's the better to improve all the metrics. And we use this approach to indicate which simulations they need to run. So this first project was to understand how we can show them that you can, with this graph, they could understand what's the reason for the best configuration. And we applied this in some other examples, always trying to increase the reduction of the number of simulations. We started like in studying precipitation also in Brazil. We had a reduction of 50%. Instead of running 64 configurations, we only executed half of them. And then we studied cyclone tracks in India. So have a larger reduction with 85%. And then we used some different variables in Norway until also some precipitation in India that we to study to make conclusions about more than 2,000 configurations. We ran only 32 simulations. So this you can reduce the number of simulations. We need less time and less computer storage to get those data, and then we can make conclusions with only 32, can make conclusions for more than 2,000 possible configurations. So this was the focus on data production. But we also have the many data already available. So there are some centers that they produced those configurations, and they have a database, and they make those data available. So in this other project, our focus is on data analysis. How can you get information from the data that they already have been run? And they were not in a DOE framework. We have the data that are available. How can we extract those information? So we found data from 1975 until 2005 from 89 different models. And we focus on precipitation and temperature. And it was founded by a research council in Norway, and our focus was in Europe. So we have data from all those regions in Europe. So in this case, we had, and those data, they come from a combination of a global climate model and a regional climate model. We have those 9 models, they are combinations of 10 different global climate models and 12 regional climate models. And the question is, what would be the best climate model, the best regional model to be used in all those regions? And since we don't have all the possible combinations, we have about 30% of the matrix completed. So we have this sparse matrix, and you want to get information for all the other possible combinations. So that's it's an ongoing project. We are working in this idea, how to get information from the models that were not done. And this is a combination of the global and climate model. So the first step was to see what would be the measure of performance. So there are several ways that you can evaluate the performance of a climate model. When you got a selection of 38 aerometrics, and then we proposed in this paper a metric that would be a combination of all those 38 aerometrics to give an overview of the performance, considering all those 38 aspects. And we used some clustering methods to get to this Bergen metric. So the name is called the Bergen metric because the Bergen is the name of a city in Norway. And most of us were in Norway working this project, and the project was financed by the Norwegian Research Council. And Bergen is known by a famous Bjerknes, that is this Bjerknes Center. They have a famous climate center. So that's why we named the metric with the name of this city. And then we developed this web tool that you can select the region. Here I'm showing the Scandinavian region, and you can select the variable, the precipitation, or the temperature. And from those combinations, we can identify what is the best GCM, or the best global model, or the best regional model. So in this example, I'm showing some of the best global models. And we use this ANOVA approach using the information. But this ANOVA approach does not have a good performance in all the region. For example, here we have the Scandinavian, and you see that there are not points all over the region, just some points. So the points that we released is the points that you have a good prediction. But we have some regions that we still don't have good prediction. And this approach that we use was not based in any artificial intelligence method. So that's our challenge now, to try to incorporate some artificial intelligence method to this problem. It's also a problem of reconstruction. We've seen artificial intelligence methods being applied for reconstruction, but reconstruction of the gaps in the data. Here we don't have gaps in the data. We have gaps in the combination, the configuration. We don't have data from all possible configurations. So we are trying to apply those methods of reconstruction to try to get better information if you can say what would be the best global model and regional model to be used in all the regions in Europe. So have just some of them. So that's an opportunity to do that. And also we are open, since we have this global network, if we have people that want to work with us in this project to try to get some information. We have one student here in Brazil that's doing the master program, and he's working in this problem, but we are willing to have more people that can contribute and have some ideas of some methods that you can use in this area. So thank you for your attention.